Taylor. Hi, ladies. Welcome back to today's episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Today we have on Taylor Welch from Wealth Cap, who we're going to be talking about the idea of generational wealth and why this is important to so many of you out there. So, Taylor, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you taking the time.
It's amazing. Thank you for having me. I'm not a lady, but I am. I'm surrounded by ladies. We have a 2-year-old daughter, obviously my wife. Both of our dogs are girl dogs. So it's like I tell people I'm in an estrogen house, and it's amazing. I love it. So thanks for having me.
Even down to the dogs. I love
down to the dogs, all ladies. That's right.
Well, so you have a amazing portfolio, not only within real estate, but within just wealth building in general. Can you share a little bit about where you kind of came from and how you got to where you are today?
100%. So actually, funny enough, my first career job was at a church in 2012. If you ask my mom, what did Taylor want to be when he was growing up? She'll tell you he wanted to be a cowboy and he wanted to be a preacher. Both at the same time. It's like my dream. And so I got into church life. I was on staff at a church in Memphis, and through a series of events, got offered a gig in real estate. It was a massive turnkey company in Memphis, Tennessee. And they were, 100, 115 houses a month, like really big. I didn't know what I was doing, but I took the job and was into property management. And people ask today, they're like, how did you learn real estate? I'm like, I actually worked for, I think, one of the best companies in the world at the time in the real estate market. And I learned on the job. And from there, went into marketing, got into the marketing business, started building the portfolio of service businesses. And in 2018, we got our first, substantial tax bill. So you're being in New York, like you understand, like
yes,
the taxes, what the tax rates look like. And so me and my business partner were freaking out because we had never had any income to really be taxed that way before.
Yeah.
So we started looking for ways to not avoid taxes, but to protect the money that was coming in from the services side, because it's not like we were spending it. We were paying ourselves pretty modest, but it was staying in the business. We were getting taxed on the business. And so long story short, we got back into real estate in the beginning of 2019, because real estate is obviously it's an appreciating asset. It's a cash flowing asset, but a lot of people miss out, and probably your crew knows this because you're teaching it. It is a depreciating asset, which entitles you to some incredible tax advantages. And so all I had to do was really get back and kind of dust off the skills, because I came from that world. We started buying properties. We started in Dallas, Texas. We got into Birmingham, Alabama, Kansas City, Missouri, expanded into Charlotte, North Carolina. And that was like my first, when I was working in the business in 2012, 2013-ish, around there.
Okay.
I didn't have any money, but I was learning the skill sets. And then fast forward to 2019, it was me getting back into the game, but I had money to play with. And so it was a very different experience, because all of a sudden it's like when you're using your money, it's like, well, I can't lose. I can't have a vacancy ever, And so it was interesting. And, we pioneered some new ways of buying, pioneered some new acquisitions methods. And so anyways, long story short, the whole story connects through to today, where, we basically take the cash flow from the services side of the business and we just lateral move it into good lands, good properties, and put great renters in the houses today. And that's what we do. It's the majority of where our money goes as of right now.
I think that's fantastic. Your story has like so much. So I want to kind of uncompact this for a second here. So one thing that I really heard that I think is great from your story is that networking idea. When years ago, you ended up just kind of falling into real estate, as many of us do. We call ourselves like the accidental landlords, right?
Yep.
So it seems like it was just someone ended up realizing that you needed work. It just happened to be real estate that you kind of fell into, and you just kind of kept that in the back of your mind, right? It was something that you had worked in. It was really, It sounds like at that point in time for you, it was just a paycheck. It was just an ends to a mean. It was something that paid your rent at the end of the month, and just kept that couple dollars in your pocket. You didn't really do much. And also for many of us, you probably didn't realize what a powerful vehicle it was at that time.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
But it really was just from talking to people and letting people know that you were looking for work that you ended up in real estate.
Yep.
So I think it's really cool that just having those conversations and being open to what you were looking for led to a job, which then kind of led to what you would end up making, creating greater wealth with down the line just a few years later. The second,
One other thing to add to that is people don't know how to help you unless you tell them. And I
Agreed.
think sometimes people get really timid, and it's like, man, they don't actually share what's on their heart. They don't share their goals. They don't share where they want to be in life. And so if the people around you don't have any sort of understanding about how they can plug you into that, then they never will. And that's not their fault. It really is, it comes down to a confidence issue. But so I'm a proponent of not only the networking aspect, but being really honest and open with people about, this is what I'd love to do. This is where I'd like to go. And then people will actually step up and connect you with those people. So you're 100%.
And that's one of the things that, like, I love to be like a big proponent of, is just being that active person to just tell everybody what it is that you're actually looking for. So some of our listeners do know that this is not my first business, if you will. I used to own a tour company in Spain for many years. I owned a bar in Portugal. And then when I moved back to the States, I had a medical consulting company. And when I had my medical consulting company here in New York, I was never telling the people that I knew. Nobody in my actual circle knew what I did. So I never got any of those referrals, because the people that I talked to on a regular basis had no idea what I was doing. Then it was more of, I'm like cold calling, hoping that that will somehow lead to a relationship. I went into real estate investing in a completely different way. I tell every single person what I'm looking for, what I'm doing, because I can't tell you how many times, Taylor, I've had people that'll call me back and be like, hey, I don't know exactly what you do in real estate, but my aunt wants to sell their house. My brother is having some struggles of going into foreclosure. This person needs an apartment and could possibly be a renter of mine. It's been a completely different world when you just tell people what it is that you're possibly looking for.
Yep, agreed.
Thank you. Thank you for backing me up on that, because I talk about it all the time in the Lady Landlords Facebook group of just making sure to do that, and also networking. It sounds like at that time, did you have kind of like a big group of people around you? Did you have a network of people, or did you have to kind of go out and start talking with people and looking for new people to kind of bring into your circle?
I didn't have a network really at all. Well, I did, but it was all church related, which wasn't necessarily helpful. Not that they were bad. They just, they weren't into real estate. They weren't into any of the things that I wanted to really be into, which I was at this point. Just to give you some context on this story, I had gotten married and we were making maybe 18 grand a year, 19 grand a year. And so we were kind of struggling financially, which was part of the reason I took the real estate position. So all of my network was really in one industry, and I had to build a new network in a new industry. And so my networking skills were less than, probably way inferior to your networking skills at the time. But all I knew to do was to start sharing with people that I was working with. Yeah, one day I'd love to own real estate. One day I'd love to do this. And then when I got into marketing, I was able to build a really, really good network by telling people, even on social media, this is what I'm wanting to do. These are my goals. And people will rally around you when they know how to help you.
Completely agreed. And people want to see the people that we know, love, trust. We want to see those people succeed. But I appreciate you, and thank you, Taylor, for being so open to share like a number and really where you were. I feel like we don't discuss that very often, and people are always kind of like, oh, this person probably had money, they probably had some trust fund.
No way.
For them to buy real estate. So I appreciate you not only just saying like, I was struggling in this position, but really also sharing what struggling is. I've talked to people that are like, oh, I'm especially here in New York. Oh, I'm struggling. I only make 6 figures. And you're like, no, honey. Like that's, unless you were on food stamps, like that doesn't necessarily count as struggling. And also it does also share that when you are in that position where you are struggling and trying to make moves to change what you're looking for, you also have to sometimes change the network that you're going to be around. Like you said, the people that were in your church group, which I'm sure were lovely and are great people, were not necessarily the person that was going to help Taylor now get into this wealth generation kind of mode and be able to kind of further what you were looking to do in your own life. Does that sound accurate?
That's it. 100%. Yeah. Which is hard to do. I think it's really hard sometimes to change, circles, because we may grow up with people and we have all of this history and backstory. And it's not that you have to cut everyone out. I still have all of those friends. It's just that I had to make a proactive choice that I'm going to expand the people that I spend time with. And sometimes that means you have to spend a little bit less time with the current crew so you can make time with the new crew. I hate it when I do see people get stuck because they grew up with this circle. And maybe that circle is a little bit toxic. Part of it's good, but a lot of it's bad. and people don't advance because ultimately they kind of stay in this plateaued environment with people. And when I see people make the leap into new networks, new territories, I always try to honor them and kind of confirm that, because it's pretty scary at the beginning. You don't really know if you're doing the right thing, if this is what I should be doing. You know, am I a sellout? Am I letting old friends go? At the end of the day, you do have to it's putting that oxygen mask on first. You got to take care of yourself and make sure that you're moving directionally towards the place that you should be for your family, for the people around you. And you're 100% accurate. And it was hard for me at first, but it was ultimately worth it.
Worth it. Exactly. Because also, like, we have to remember that, once again, like our circle friends, people we've been friends with for years, that we grew up with, like, there still are parts of our life. But if you yourself desire something more, if you want something else out of life, we have to be willing to change and grow with that. Yes. to obtain that. It's kind of like that idea that we can't be sitting there doing the exact same thing, thinking that we're going to get different results. We ourselves have to change and grow. And we should always, as humans, be in this perpetual state of growth, in order to then really attract and be able to have an opportunity to go after what we want. And I can say that the 15,000 women that we have in the Lady Landlords Facebook group itself are all asking and looking for something bigger and something that can really provide something and improve the quality of life that they have today. So we have to get a little uncomfortable, get a little comfortable with the uncomfortable, as they say, and be willing to change some of those relationships and grow as people and grow with the network. I think that's it's so cool about our community, is that you just found thousands of other women like yourself that are looking for those changes. And it's a great opportunity to kind of be able to build there. Now, when at any point, like back, once again, now thinking about this, when you just got married, you took that job as that property manager, did you like daydream, think about getting to the place where you are today?
Not as I didn't see it then. I had goals. My wife was an entrepreneur actually first. So she had her own hair salon. I actually didn't really know what entrepreneurship was until we got married. You know, you hear these stories about people like when they were 7 years old, they started a lemonade business. And I'm like, man, sometimes I wish that was me, because I would have had that experience, but it wasn't at all. You know, my wife was she built her business pretty quickly in Memphis. And so even when I was at the real estate company, I was making more money. And within about a year, she was, making way more money than I was. And so my vision shifted as her vision shifted. And I think what I wanted more than anything was to have the freedom to work when I wanted to, from wherever I wanted to. Because her name is Lindsay. She's making money. She can go to work when she wants or not work when she wants. And I'm showing up to a 9 to 5. And so I'm kind of like, wait a minute, like, how do I get out of this? Yeah. So my vision was very narrow. It wasn't like, I want to have $1 billion in real estate and blah, blah, blah. It was, I want to be able to like work from Starbucks in the lobby and work 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And once I started moving towards that, and this is the funny thing about vision, this is the funny thing about goals, is when you see what's possible, the proper response, and this is what will happen to you, is your vision will begin to enlarge. And at first you want to make 100 grand, but then when you get to 100, you're like, well, I think that 200 is actually pretty doable, Yeah. And you don't want to get stuck on that, because that can become a hamster wheel where it's like, you're always looking for like, well, that person has a bigger boat, or she makes more money, and that's not necessarily the path to freedom. But what is healthy, in my opinion, is for you to set a target, move towards that target, but be comfortable. And this comes from your circle, your environment. If you're paired up with a bunch of people who have 10 times as many assets as you do, it's natural for you to be like, well, maybe I need to double my goals. Maybe I need to keep growing. So to answer your question, I didn't see any of this happening. I just didn't have the capacity to see that. That we started Traffic and Funnels, which is the main service business, in 2015. We started Sales Mentor, which is the staffing company, in 2019. And now we've got a third service business, and Wealth Gap has 2 businesses in it. And it's like, oh my goodness, when you look back, it's kind of crazy. All I was doing, let me simplify this for you, is just like, take the next step, master it, and then take the next step, and then take the next step. And you learn as you go. And I tell people this all the time. If you're driven more by the outcome than you are by the process or the journey, like you're probably going to burn out. And I think this is also a male thing. So I don't know if the feminine energy will struggle with this the same way, but on the masculine energy, it's like, we just want to, set every target on fire, burn everything in our way. Like, it can be really unhealthy. And one of the things my wife is really, really good at, she's helped me with, is like, maybe we can just hang out here and enjoy the process for a little bit. And I think that that's such a brilliant tug of war to happen inside of your own life. I don't know if I'm making sense, but
no, I like how you call that a tug of war. So I struggle with that. Like, I'll have no problem admitting that I just want to be like, cool. I just want to like get to the end. I just want to get to my goals. And for all of our listeners, they always know that my goal is actually to go live in the Dominican Republic and live on a beach. So it's very different than New York. But so I just want to get to that end point. To me, like every day, like I feel like you've seen those memes, I'm sure, like on Facebook or whatever, that are just like, oh, I woke up again today and I'm not a millionaire yet, and it's just, I feel like I'm that person that just like wakes up and I'm like, where is this now? But sometimes we really need to take a step back and say, well, look how far I've come. I didn't plan on investing in real estate. That wasn't something that wasn't on my goals. As we talked about before, I'm a cancer researcher. I didn't plan on buying real estate. I didn't plan on buying the second house, the third house, the fourth house, and now I was able to grow my portfolio to 10 doors, which to me actually puts me in that financially free kind of category. Wasn't what I set out to do, wasn't my goal, but I have that struggle of like, I want this all to have happened yesterday, but
100%.
And it's funny because my husband is very similar then to your wife, Lindsay, where my husband just kind of like, but look what you've accomplished. Why don't we just enjoy the fact we have 9 houses today? Can we be happy that we have that? Let's take a look and enjoy that process and realize, as I said before, so I will say that it was I need to listen to my own advice. Sometimes we need to be able to grow with ourselves. We need to be perpetually kind of upgrading and changing. So like you said, your vision at one point was like, okay, let me just get to like 100 grand in income. Then it was, okay, well, let me get to 200 grand. And these things kind of just open our minds and open doors for us of what else is possible. But that tug of war is completely normal for any of us in entrepreneur world, in investing world, of just saying, well, this is what I want. Why do I have to actually do the work? Why can't I just like skip to the end process?
Totally true. Yep.
So a little difficult for us to understand, but I'm glad it sounds like that's something that you've really honed in on. And I feel like that's actually probably been one of your best assets as an entrepreneur, is that it sounds like you're really looking at what is the next step. And then what's the next step after that? I loved when you said that really for you, it's master this, then figure out what's next, not trying to take on everything all at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. And the framework that we have for clients, and then now myself, that I even use and potentially helpful for you as well, as you've got that driven gene, is, to build drive, you look into the future and you look at what could be, and you look at what should be, and what do you want, and what's the destination. But a lot of times I've found people will do that at the expense of looking at the past. And so I have, one of the things I do just for me is I got really into journaling in 2013-ish. So I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of journal entries. I use an app called Day One. And
write that down.
So legit, like, if I pulled up Day One right now and looked back at 2015, oh my goodness, like I am so grateful. Like, look at all of the things that have happened, and oh my God, what has God done? Like, but we forget to do that sometimes. And so we just get like, we're running hot all the time. We've got all of this drive and all of this, I just want to get there. Sometimes inserting one time a day or one time every other day where you're looking backwards, and Day One allows you to put pictures in there. And so legit, I can go through and relive parts of my life, and it really locks in the perspective for me. Like, man, everything's going to be okay. Look how far we've come. Even if we don't move forward at all for the next 1 year, like look how far ahead we are from 2016 or 2017. It's a really healthy, content feeling to have from time to time.
No, I agree. I'm going to have to check out Day One. I think that sounds great, because I think it is very hard to remember where we came from. Remember that with the struggle that we had yesterday, we got through that thing that we all thought was going to be like the end of our life, that it was going to completely destroy us, that we're never going to make it through.
2020. Yep.
You had to shout that out, right? You had to add that
in
there.
I know.
But also like I'm incredibly impressed too. And I hope that you're proud of this, like of what you've accomplished in a short period of time. When you talk about like starting this business in 2015, starting this business in 2018, those are not that long ago. You have
No.
accomplished and really grown so much in a short period of time, that I think is really kind of amazing. But you still have that mentality of let's master this and then let's move on to the next step. So it's, once again, it's not like this is taking, so all of our listeners out here can just understand that it's not like you have to wait 60 years to get to where you want to be. If this is something that you can do one step at a time, enjoying the journey, not getting burnt out, but still moving towards your goals of generational wealth.
Yep.
So now why, as you've kind of grown, and once again, now you've developed and become like kind of a different person, what is that, like, why? What is that purpose for generational wealth that keeps you kind of motivated and going?
It's probably multiple things. For starters, I have a family, and when I was coming up in, going through high school and college, my family had a difficult time. They went through a bankruptcy, and I remember just being in a not super vulnerable because I like had a job. I was actually a server at a restaurant, and I wasn't homeless, but I remember being in a position kind of being like, wow, my dad's always made so much money, and now I'm having to pay for my own gas, and there's no help. Like it was probably one of the first moments like nobody can save me right now. Like if I lose this job. And if you build on top of that into me then working at a church after that season and not having much money, I want to teach my kids. I don't want to give them everything where it's like, they're not gonna, my 2-year-old, her name is Kate. Her middle name is Wild, and she lives up to that middle name, Wilde. She is the best in the world, but she's crazy. But she's not going to be a trust fund baby. I'm not going to give her. She's going to have to learn the rules and the financial intelligence. But it's fulfilling to me to know that my kids will grow up knowing that they have the rules of the game, and their dad taught them and their mom taught them. And I didn't necessarily get that. And my parents were amazing, and I love them. And they have their lives together in a great way, but I never got the rules from them, if that makes sense. And so when we talk generational wealth, people tend to think John Rockefeller and Carnegie, and they think of the Rothschilds, and, we can talk about that if you want to. There are these massive whole life policies you can put together, build irrevocable living trust. Like I know all of that because I had to get into it, but at least half of the game when it comes to generational wealth is the intelligence necessary to make smart decisions. And I think that's where we're lacking when you talk about the American education system and schools and what are we teaching our kids? Because I don't know about you, but I came out of school, not really knowing how to budget money. Just didn't know how to do it.
We had one class. I will never forget this class. It was like a home ec class or something like that. And literally we were taught how to write a check in script. And that was and that was one day for like 30 minutes. It was like, here's how you write a check.
Yep.
Make sure you sign on the bottom. And that was our financial education. And I went to a really good school. Like I went to a public school in a really good place in Westchester County. Like I went to like a top school. And the most I got from a financial education was how to write a check out.
Because that is basically financial intelligence, right? How to spend money, how to write a check.
How to spend money.
I
love
crazy.
How you said that. How to spend, not how to save, not how to invest, not how to build wealth, but literally how to spend, how to put money back in the economy.
And the reason why, and this is like, if you study, the Fed just had a meeting yesterday, and there's all of these things right now because they're struggling to maintain and contain the inflation rate right now because of all the extra money we've put into the system. And I think that a lot of it comes down to people who are educated well are more dangerous to establish the establishment. And so it's kind of suppressed, and not in a way, I'm not being like, conspiratorial or anything. It's just like, we don't do a good job in America teaching financial education and financial independence, because if you're independent, then you're no longer subject to the machine. And so when it comes down to it, when we talk about generational wealth, what are my whys? What drives me today? I want the freedom to be able to travel, and, I don't I don't see myself buying a whole island in Dominican, but you can do that. And that's going to be amazing. But I want my family and my kids to be able to grow up, because we're not gonna be here forever. My kids are going to be here one day doing this without me. And I want to make sure that they have the resources, which is intelligence, education, a little bit of funding, to be able to live out their lives and their dreams. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So, and this is not a question that I'm asking for you necessarily to solve, but I would love to hear your opinion on it. But since we're not getting a financial education from school, since we are not learning in the typical avenues that we think of, we should get our education for life. How do we go about educating ourselves about financial literacy?
Well, people like you are doing a great job at that. You know,
I didn't pay him to say that.
She didn't pay me to say that. I would be honest with you, but legitimately, because we run massive education businesses. And we don't have any right now that are on the topic of financial intelligence, but there are people like you and people like me in different veins that are doing a really good job at, raising up platforms and raising up, men and women to learn the rules of the game. There are books that people can study. I think my first book that was like, oh my goodness, like everything I know is wrong, was Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad. And
ooh, great topic, because I'm sure most of our listeners have actually read that. So come on,
okay.
I would love to hear your critique on this.
There was nothing tactical that was, when people ask me today about what's a good book that I can learn about money, I actually don't share with them that book. I'm like, you need to get into like The Creature from Jekyll Island, if you've read that one, or The Bitcoin Standard actually is not as much about crypto as it is the history of finance and currencies. So there are some really good ones. But when I was in La Jolla, California, at a Hilton hotel on the treadmill, and I was reading about, this is funny because I remember exactly where I was. And Kiyosaki in this book was talking about how he wanted a new car. And so instead of paying for it, he had his stockbroker basically go out, invest into some high growth companies, create the money, paid the car in cash. I was like, it just hit me. I was like, I shouldn't be paying for anything. Financial intelligence basically procures assets for free. And that kind of started me down just a rabbit hole. Like, I have to figure out how to do this, because I had gotten myself at that point to making good money. We were probably $500,000 plus of income a year. Everything was good. Life was great. But that was the thing that taught me, like, I'm paying for things one-to-one. And when you learn how to procure assets, you flip that around, you fund the asset account first, and then those assets pay for everything else outside. And so, not necessarily a critique, but that was the big idea that I got from that book. And it was all I needed to run down that rabbit hole.
Love it. So let's apply that concept now to real estate. So share with me then how we can do that instead of the buying of a car. What does that look like then for rental properties? Okay.
So first of all, especially right now, land would be the equivalent of, like a crypto that's fixed in supply. There's no more land. We can't get more of it. Elon is trying to get us, wherever he wants us to go, Mars or the moon or whatever. And if that happens, then we might have a spike in supply of land, because we can go buy a plot of land on Mars. But for now, we are stuck with a current fixed supply of land. When you can buy a piece of land, what you're buying the antithesis of something like the US dollar. The US dollar is not fixed. We pump a lot of US dollars into the economy, but we can't do that with land. When you have fixed supply and you have an ever increasing rate of demand, the value is guaranteed to go up, right? So everyone should just know the math. When you put a building on top of a piece of land and you put a renter, then it turns the appreciating asset into a cash flowing asset, because appreciation and cash flow are not the same thing. When you add leverage into the mix, you're able to triple and quadruple the rate of returns, because if you think about the way inflation works, you tell me how deep you want me to go on this.
Keep going. This is really helpful.
When you put an asset under a piece of leverage, what happens is that land value will appreciate, but the debt does not appreciate. Debt is fixed. So you have $100,000 piece of land. You have 75,000 of that as debt. You have 25,000 in equity. Well, when that land becomes $200,000, the debt doesn't double. The debt stays at 75. And so the wealthiest people in the world today, the super, super, super rich, they are indiscriminately just going out and buying land, because if you have all of this excess capital, the only way to protect. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a second.
The only way to protect capital is to get it converted out of USD into a piece of land. So anyways, how does real estate play into, financial freedom, and how do you use financial intelligence to do that? Ideally, you take the amount of money that you make, you siphon off a piece, and you put that into an account that can, with leverage, buy yourself property, cash flow it. And then after a certain amount of time, you can actually access the equity in that property via HELOCs, via refinancing, via whatever. And you harvest the cash flows from that. You harvest the appreciation to buy more assets. That's
so just like you were talking about in the book, you're not necessarily going out and trading that one for one. You're not saying, okay, car costs $20,000. I'm in New York. I don't know what cars cost. Car costs $20,000. So I need to then pay $20,000. That needs to be an exchange, right? I give you the $20,000. You give me a car that's worth $20,000 till I drive it off the lot. But that's that one-to-one exchange that you're talking about. But here, what you're saying from the book, and now what we're applying to real estate, is really the idea of what can you do with that $20,000 to actually increase and leverage that money that you already have in your hand today to be able to bring you that asset. So once again, now you're saying, for the car example, that 20K is now in an account that's generating extra income, that's increasing from that 20 grand. So now we can buy that car with what we've leveraged from the original $20,000. Same thing with how we can now make that with real estate, because once we have that asset, once you have that one rental property, as you said, we can pull out some of that equity. So now from that one house, we can actually get that second, third property, all by using that same first one. Is 100%. That a good summary?
Here's another example, just really quick, if you want me to take you through a quick example. A buddy of mine he wanted a piece of land in Birmingham-ish, the Smith Lake area. And so, $150,000, $180,000 plot of land, you put leverage on that, and the bank will give him that land, and it's going to be $1,000 a month. Okay. So rather than just putting $50,000 down and then paying $1,000 a month, what he's doing right now is he has some money inside of our fund, which is a non-variable rate of return. And then he's got a couple properties that he got hooked up with through Devin. And those two investments are paying him a couple $1,000s a month, which pays the land. The land is appreciating. And at the end of the term, he can get his full capital back, and he doesn't pay for the land. So the land is essentially free.
Isn't that beautiful?
It's amazing.
Yeah. And now, do you feel that there's any other investment vehicle that can provide these same types of returns like we're talking about within real estate?
Not stabilized. You can, but not stabilized. I mean, if you can predict the future and that Uber is going to be what it is, then you could do that. But
yeah, so all those people out there with their crystal ball, feel free to give me a call. You can talk to Taylor and I'll offline.
Yeah, we'll pay you for access to that. But I told people, like, last year we were kind of going into, this was early February. We all sort of COVID was on our radar, and we were like sort of paying attention, and we were talking about real estate. And I was like, I think real estate is still the safest asset class in the world, because what you have to realize is that when you invest into the markets, or even the S&P or the indexes or whatever, you are betting on, which is not necessarily bad, but you're betting on American innovation in financial engineering as compared to China and the UK and when you invest into housing, you're really making this bet. You're saying, I think that in the next 20 years, people are going to want to have buildings to live in. That's the bet. Yeah, I don't think people are going to want to live on streets. I think they're going to want a house.
Really? Well, Taylor, I don't know if I can agree with you on that one. I don't know if I can get on board.
It's very, very controversial. I know people love the streets, but here's the thing. It's what an amazing bet to make. And so when we talk about safety, stability, there's nothing that can compare to it, because there's no other bet that can really hold the same, Vegas odds as the bet that people don't want to be homeless. There you go. That's great.
Not only is housing clearly something that we need, right? And that's just the way that the world works, and that's how we're going to live. But I also feel like when we talk about kind of now coupling this with that idea that we don't really get that financial literacy piece in our typical school system here, or from necessarily our parents. I grew up in a very financially illiterate home as well. I do feel like, to me, real estate and understanding like a rental property is a much easier concept for me to get into investing than trying to figure out stocks or Bitcoin or this other new thing that popped up yesterday. I am a human that lives in a house. I therefore have a pretty good concept of what having somebody else that would then need to live in a house would be like. Like, it's just an easy, to me, it's a very easy access into investing. Then now I feel like, as we talked about with the car scenario, I now have this extra disposable income that I can say, okay, well, now I can go learn this new skill. Now I can put some money into stocks. Now I can put some money into Bitcoin, because I'm taking that money that I already made in real estate. It's not what I'm trading my time and money for. It's now what I'm using that I've already built and already invested in. That's kind of now a little bit of that play money that I can say, okay, now I can take it and go learn a new type of investing that is, to me at least, more complicated than give roof over head to human.
Right. This is about as basic as you can get, and as safe as you can get.
Yeah, because there's always going to be a need for that, right? We're not going anywhere. We're, like you said, people are not looking to go live out on the streets. Neither one of our locations, I really think, are great year-round outside weather. So, you know, don't actually know of any place that has that. So is that for you personally? Are you, I know personally that you are heavily invested like in real estate, but is that still your preferred method? Even now, years later, is real estate investing still your preferred method of investing?
For capital protection and, you know, growth, 100%.
Yes.
Absolutely. There's nothing, you know, that's 75% of my portfolio in terms of storing money is in real estate right now.
And when you say storing money, I want to just make sure that this is clear for our listeners. You're talking about, once again, where you can kind of park that money. Because I love the other thing that, circling way back to the beginning of your story, when you talked about getting that big tax bill, right? And you said, okay, shit, like we need to figure out something we can do to alleviate the size of that bill, right?
Yeah.
And real estate was the avenue that you ended up taking. Can you talk a little bit about why you chose that and the benefits that you see in real estate when it comes to taxes?
Yeah. So when we're talking about earning money, it's a very different discussion than when we're talking about, you know, investing money, or slice investing in half and say, you know, you've got investors who they want really high yields, but they're willing to tolerate a high risk appetite, versus investors who want a decent yield, but they don't want to lose the money. I think most of the people listening to this, like, you work hard for the money, you know, you're not lazy, you have worked hard to create the capital that you have. The last thing you want to do is like put it into some asset class that, like, it could double or you could lose everything. You know, that's a gamble, and that's not what we do. And so when it comes to our decision to really park money in real estate, it's mostly because if you go through the risks of real estate, you know, the list is very short compared to stock portfolios or mutual funds. You know, you've got whole life insurance, you got real estate. Those two things are the safest asset classes in the world, in my opinion, if you purchase right.
Oh, I love that you said that. I am a fan of whole life insurance.
Yes.
Not everybody else is. And from someone that reads a lot of the different blogs within financial independence and all that, just like we talked about with Rich Dad Poor Dad, there are certain people that are like, oh, well, this is the Bible of financial independence, so I have to follow absolutely everything. I'm not going to think what's good for me. I'm going to be like, oh, what is the masses going to do?
Right.
And I always teach people, no, we need to take in that information and then apply it to ourselves, and then say, is this something that will work for me, or is something not, right? There is no complete blueprint for all 15,000 people listening to this to be able to do the exact same. There's just not. But I'm so happy that you gave a shout out to whole life insurance.
It's amazing. Permanent coverage is an asset, and people just get confused on it, which is fine. It's complex, it's complicated, but it's worth studying. So, but back to the tax situation, we figured out that, so here's the formula for real estate depreciation. You have to cost segregate it. They're not going to write off the land, but you can write off the building. And so if you take a portfolio, let's say 10 houses at $300,000 per house, you have $3 million in real estate. You take that $3 million, this is going to get into some math here, so people I hope their eyes don't water over, and just stay with me. You take 80% of that. Let's just ballpark it, because, cost seg 80% is probably the building, 20% is the land. And then you can write off, so that's 2.4 million. You can write off 17% of that, 2.4 million. Okay. So it comes up to $408,000.
Kind of a big deal. It's kind of
It's
a big deal.
It's a big deal. And that's called forced depreciation. And when you get into big cost segregation write-offs, it's called hyper forced depreciation. CPAs call it different things. But for us, if we acquire about seven times the amount of our annual income in real estate, what happens is, the IRS looks at that and they say, you bought so much real estate that you have all of these losses that we're not even going to take taxes from you, because your depreciation equals the income that you made. And so it's just a one-to-one, wash. There's not really another asset class that the government rewards you the same way as just saying, like, you don't have to pay taxes. I think people look at this and they're like, well, that's a bad thing. You're a scum, you don't pay taxes. But we're in a system that literally incentivizes you to do what is good for people. That's just like, we buy houses, we fix them, we make them look really beautiful, and we allow people to rent them for, at or under market rates. And so nothing else is going to give you the same tax agility that real estate does, and still cash flow. You can buy a plane and you can take 95% of that plane, you can depreciate it down and not pay taxes, but that plane is not going to cash flow for you. It's not going to store its value. It's going to depreciate every single day for the rest of its life. And so with real estate, it's the only asset class that gets more and more valuable. It cash flows while you're holding it, and it saves you the money in tax liability.
So this is kind of just like an all around like win-win. That's just what I'm hearing you say. Yeah, that's what I'm hearing you say, that like that's, and I'm so happy that there are so many people that are really realizing what an amazing vehicle that real estate can be for someone, that this can really change our complete trajectory on wealth building. That really excites me. I'm so glad that you broke down those numbers for us. I'm so glad that you took us through multiple different scenarios of why real estate is such a great benefit for all of us that are looking for this financial freedom. Is there any other tip that you would like to leave our ladies with today about either investing, generational wealth, anything of that side, Taylor?
The biggest tip is probably just to start small and somewhere. Our first deal was a house in Watauga, outside of Dallas. It was
what state is that?
Yeah, Dallas, Texas. It was like $189,000. It wasn't a big deal, and we didn't renovate it. We didn't do any. We bought it from someone who turnkeyed it for us. It was our first deal, and I think we cash flowed $300 a month on that. And so it's not like, oh man, like, $300 a month, we can buy anything in the world we want. But that's not the point. The point is that you just take that first step. You start with one deal, and then all of a sudden you are a real estate investor. It's like day one, you just cross into that threshold. And then when you're comfortable, you add a second house. And then when you're comfortable, you get a third one. And this is like, I think some people just set themselves up for some heartache because they want to go from zero to owning the Dominican Republic. Sound familiar? in a couple months, but life doesn't necessarily work that way. You got to do the first thing right, and then you earn the right to do the second thing. And so my advice is kind of follow in our footsteps a little bit, follow in your footsteps. You started with one deal. Everyone does. The biggest real estate investor in the world today started with one deal, and they just built from there. And so you can actually follow in the same trajectory. It doesn't sound like tactical advice, but it's simple and it's easy to implement. And once you get the first deal, you're going to be that much closer to getting the second one.
Completely agreed. And honestly, we need to get in the game. You need 100%. To get into the game. Like if this is what you're looking for, and we sit around, you could read all the books on it. You can listen to all the podcasts on it. But unless you get your first deal, you have to get in the game to be able to win it. So
that's right.
Taylor, thank you very much. For all of our listeners, I'll make sure in the show notes to link to Taylor and his different businesses so you can follow his story and his journey as he continues to invest and grow. Also, if anybody is looking for help on making sure that you can get that first deal, please check out the Lady Landlords Roadmap program. That is our signature mentorship program. You can find the information and the link as well down in the show notes. And we will be back next week with our next episode of the Lady Landlords podcast. Thank you all for listening in today. And Taylor, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.